Savvy regards once again to the staff of Nemata, student teachers in the Sacred Groves, as well as to guests and visitors to the campus. This is the main professor recording on the 22nd of June, 2019. This is the moment which, as you all know, is generally celebrated as the first day of summer, the day of the summer solstice. In the Gaian calendar, that is not the case, however. In the converted calendar, which is also known as Marita's calendar, Marita, M-I-R-I-T-A, the day of the solstice is not the first day of summer, but it's the peak day of summer, truly midsummer. So in Marita's calendar, summer begins around the 2nd of May and ends around the 4th or 5th of August. So the solstice, the 21st of June, is the midpoint between those 2 points, which are traditionally known as the cross quarter days of the ancient Celtic calendar. In any case, however you figure it, I'm taking this day as an occasion to make a special presentation to guests and visitors to the campus. I can tell you at the outset that the material I'm presenting to you today, in text and talk, is top priority. It's among the most important content. It contains some of the imperative features of the teaching that I present as a Gnostic and as a proponent of Gaian Tantra or planetary Tantra, as well as a proponent of Sovienic animism. So here we go. I'm taking a big step today in putting out this material. The title of the text is Against Universality, the Great Dissent. So I'm going to be talking to you about the Great Dissent. What is the Great Dissent? And how you might engage yourself with that event, because the Great Dissent is an event in progress. Now, I can assure you that this is a momentous undertaking for me. Try to take that statement on board. That being so, I know that it's even more a tremendous undertaking for you. And it's my intention, which I want you to know at the outset, not to make this matter difficult. It is a difficult matter. It can be an extremely difficult matter. But in starting this talk, I would like to make clear my commitment to all of you, staff and guests alike, that I'm going to do my level best to make this as little difficult as possible. I guess that's about the best way that I could state it. So what is so difficult? What is the problem here? What am I going to be tackling in this talk and the accompanying text? Well, quite simply, I'm going to be tackling the problem of how you perceive your own humanity as it relates to how you perceive the humanity of others. Now, you might not think that your perception of yourself as a human being, a member of the human species, and the attendant perception of others who stand before you in the world, whom you recognize as human. You might think it's not a problem, but I'm telling you, you're wrong about that. You're really, really wrong if you think it's not a problem. So it's my intention to point out to you what that problem is, to point to the correction of the problem, well, to indicate the source of the problem, to describe how the problem originated, and to direct you to the solution to that problem, which entails nothing less than an entirely different way to perceive humanity. Not only the humanity in yourself, such as that be, but also, as well, the humanity in others. So I can assure you that this is some really deep shit we're getting into here, to use the language of the street. And you may wonder why I would choose to put out this material in a public access talk to visitors and guests of Nematta. After all, being such a steep problem, such a momentous and deep problem, you might think that I would reserve discussion of this problem and elucidation of problem and solution for veterans in planetary Tantra and for those in the staff, the student teachers who show their commitment to my work by their material and creative participation. But no, it's not like that. You're here because of an interest in planetary Tantra. And no matter what your grasp or comprehension of that may be, there's something I want you to know at the outset. Practice of planetary Tantra not only involves, but requires a total revamping of your sense of humanity. And this is where it starts. I want to advise you that this talk and text together are just the introduction to the subject. But I've decided today that I am going to bring this subject in its full elaboration to everyone on Nematta and not reserve it simply for veterans or people on the staff. It is primary to your participation in planetary Tantra that you should comprehend and face this problem about the perception of humanity. In order to prime you for that comprehension, I'm going to give you the leading clue going in. Before I say anything else, before I go into the text in any way, let me give you the leading clue, which tells you really what you will have as the takeaway of this instruction, this particular and unique instruction. So it goes like this. Whether you know it or not, you have been taught to perceive humanity in a certain way. And that way of perceiving humanity is so common to you that you don't question it, that you assume that it could not be otherwise. It's as if when you were born, someone placed a pair of glasses on you, like Google glasses. So you're a newborn child and somebody straps a pair of Google glasses on you, and then you grow and you get older and you get to be 4 or 5 years old or 10 or 20 years old, and you never know what it might be like not to have those glasses strapped to your head. What I'm going to tell you, beginning in this talk and in a couple of follow-up talks, is about how you have been subjected to a tactic of deceit. The way you see the humanity in yourself and the way you see humanity or think you see it, when you look at another human animal, is due to a tactic of deceit. And it's my intention to expose this tactic of deceit. So if I'm successful, you will then have an option, which will be, quite simply, oh, well, there's another way of looking at humanity. Well, I think I'll consider it, because I realize from what John said that the way I've been told to view humanity is wrong. You'll have that option. Secondarily, it's my wish that as a consequence of this particular line of Gnostic instruction, that you will see, as I do, and as some others around me already see, the total and complete imperative necessity for the collapse of Christianity. So there you have it. And on that happy note, let us proceed into the written material. At the top of the text is a photograph, one of many, many thousands that have been taken in various through various apertures, through various telescopic and photographic techniques, of the interior of the Orion Nebula. At the interior of this nebula is a tight formation of stars known as the trapezium. So the nebula itself is called M42, the Orion Nebula. And the trapezium is this configuration of stars, which you see there, in the form of a trapezoid or trapezium. Extremely famous in the realms of astronomy. You can go research it on the internet. You'll find volumes of photographs and volumes of articles that have been written about this locale. What you will not find in any of those articles is what you find in the Sophianic narrative, the fallen goddess scenario. According to that narrative, the genomic plasm of the Anthropine species, from which all strains of the human species emerge, is embedded in the trapezium. It actually hangs in the trapezium like a hammock. The trapezium may be imagined as a kind of cradle. The four most prominent bright stars of the trapezium, plus dozens of others, present a structure upon which the Anthropine genome is deposited like dew on a spider's web. And that is exactly how it looks, and that is exactly the analogy you can use to visualize this phenomenon. You know, in my elaboration of the sacred narrative of the mysteries, the fallen goddess scenario, I've been extremely careful to point out those aspects of the scenario which I draw directly from surviving sources, and I cite those sources meticulously. We can call that first degree material. Second degree material, I specify as elaborations or extrapolations based upon the sources. You get that difference? Not directly or literally found in the sources, but extrapolated from the sources, with great care, I must add. And then there is a third degree of material in the FGS, and that is novel or accessory material, which I have actually added. So I have added to the narrative, inherited from the Magi, the Magian order, the Gnostic schools, concerning the cosmology of our planet and the origins of the human species. I have added to that material the detail that the Anthropine genome is deposited in M42, the Orion Nebula. I do that quite simply on the basis of my investigations as a shaman. Well, my investigations as a shaman are exactly the same as the shamanic investigations of the Teleste, who initially developed the fallen goddess scenario. So even though I may here and there, very rarely, add a new element, as I've done here, I do so consistent with the method in which the narrative was developed in the first place. Clear enough? All right. So I've said in my little introduction, a little longer than I would like it to have been, that this topic is all about how you perceive humanity. Well, those who take an interest in the fallen goddess scenario, which is at the core of planetary Tantra, might also take a clue for their perception of humanity from the Petalia amulet. I've cited this amulet in a number of other units on Nematta. It contains, among others, these three lines. The lines are stated in the first person, I. That indicates that they represent the confession or declaration of someone who has undergone an initiation. In the lines preserved on the tablet, which is a thin leaf of beaten gold, inscribed with writing, the neophyte testifies to the experience of initiation in this way. I am a child of earth and starry heaven, but my origins are in heaven alone. You yourselves know this. So with those three simple lines, you already have a basis for the perception of the humanity in yourself and in others. You have literally a basis to perceive the origins of humanity, which are in heaven alone. And when you look at the Orion Nebula, which you can see with the naked eye, although you can't see the trapezium itself, but when you look toward that blur in the sky, located on the right thigh of the figure of Orion, who is inarguably the most widely known and recognized celestial constellation of all, you are actually looking at the location of your origins. So, moving on in the text, I bring up as a point of departure a most hideous citation from the mainstream media. And there you'll see that I've linked a 6-minute clip, and I've extracted in audio about 40 seconds from that clip. In those 40 seconds, you hear a hideous creature in the USSA government making a statement. She is objecting to the fact that the President of the United States referred to certain people as animals. Of course, in Tantric cosmology and in planetary Tantra, we consider ourselves as animals. So from our viewpoint, this is not an insult. We obviously have a completely different concept of animals than ordinary people do. But as you would all know, to call someone an animal in a routine and mundane way is to insult them, to place them in a derogatory or inferior or undesirable status compared to a human being. So the President of the United States used animal as an insulting and degrading term in referring to some members of the well-known Mexican gang M13 who have been known from time to time to commit some pretty brutal and sadistic acts. But this creature from the House of Congress in the United States really protested, and she stated her view that it was really unacceptable for the president to call these Mexican gang members animals just because they butchered a couple of teenage girls alive with machetes. And they've done far worse than that. And she stated her protest in the language of the strictly Judeo-Christian view of humanity. And you listen to her words there for 40 seconds, you know? We are all God's children. And there is a spark of divinity in everyone. And how can it be? Does the president not believe in the dignity and worth of every person? Because if you do, then you would see the humanity in these M13 gang members. And you would respect the dignity and worth of those gang members based on your perception of the humanity and the essence of humanity that resides in them as it resides in you. So how do you like that proposition? How would you like to go along with that? If you stood right now on the street in front of one of those members, tattooed members of the M13 gang, and looked him in the eyes, are you going to see in him the same humanity that you see in yourself? Do you feel obligated to? Well, according to Nancy Pelosi, you damn well do feel obligated to. And if you don't show that you hold this way of perceiving, then you are inhumane, and there is something less than human about you. All of that enforcement, it really is an enforcement. Let me put it in this way. The implicit enforcement in the obligation to view humanity in that way is fundamental to the Judeo-Christian view of the human species. And it is just that view that has to be broken. That view is actually an evil spell that has been cast upon you that prevents you from having another kind of perception of humanity. So if you are willing to accept that a false sense of humanity and a false perception of humanity has been imposed on you, then you may be willing to consider that there is another way to look at humanity, and that's where I'm going in these talks. So the next section is titled Spark of Divinity, and there I cover some really important points about this concept that all human beings have a spark of divinity in them. And I go into the background of this concept, and I show that, as a matter of fact, the Gnostics were wrongly accused of holding the view that we are sparks of divinity who have lost ourselves in the darkness and evil of material existence. That is not a genuine Gnostic view, although it is widely and almost unanimously considered to be one. Those of you who are listening now, and let's say, who have read Not in His Image, will know that I've taken considerable effort to refute this view, which is called routinely scholars call it the anti-cosmism of the Gnostics, anti-cosmic. The claim that Gnostics rejected the material world, the claim that they considered it to be the creation of an inferior or satanic deity, is entirely wrong. And I've corrected it in a number of ways on a number of occasions. So what I do here in this text is simply reiterate a couple of the main points of my refutation. For instance, you will find in the Nag Hammadi materials, which are written in a Greek Coptic mélange, that there is a distinction between the use of the word cosmos and the use of the word kaz. And kaz, K-A-Z, is the Coptic variant of the Greek geia, or ge, G-E, meaning the earth. Well, those texts, if you read them meticulously, distinguish the earth from the cosmos or the system. So for Gnostics, the word cosmos, which is best translated as system in this sense, was something negative, more comparable to the matrix. According to the Gnostics, we live on the earth, kaz, geia, which is the body of the Aeon Sophia in material immanence. And that is not a prison, that is not a delusion, that is not a matrix. But there is a system of deceit imposed upon us within this natural world we inhabit. So the natural world is not evil, but the system of deceit imposed upon us directs us away from the truth. And to that extent, it can be considered to be evil, that is to say, working against life. So there you go. There are many ways to state this proposition, and I've talked about it many, many times in my interviews on the internet and so forth. The spark of divinity lost in the murk and darkness of the material world is, when you actually examine that paradigm and go looking for the cultural and textual roots, it is, you will find, a teaching of Talmudic Judaism and the Kabbalah. As a matter of fact, I put spark of divinity into the search engine, went and clicked on images, and guess what was the first image that came up? Is a painting, which I reproduce here, on the site Chabad.org. And Chabad.org is a platform for the theology and ideology and dogma of Chabad Lubavitch, which is the leading Talmudic sect in the world. Chabad Lubavitch is also an extremely potent political and financial influence in the world. As a matter of fact, the Yehudi concept of correction, which is called Tikkun Olam, is based on this narrative that there are sparks of divinity who have fallen away from unity in the Godhead, fallen into material darkness, and need to be recovered, collected out of the darkness, and restored to unity in the Godhead. That, in a sentence, is the basic theological proposition of Chabad Lubavitch and of Talmudic Judaism. Now, it remains to be seen if these, quote, sparks of divinity, unquote, are descriptions of some divine essence, immaterial spiritual essence that abides in all human animals, or if it only abides in certain human animals who are of a superior status in the species, or may even belong to a higher species than what we commonly recognize as human. So there you go. And from that topic, I segue back to the topic of the Orion Nebula. I do so because I want you all to be perfectly clear on where you come from. You know, you don't have to imagine where you come from. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to speculate. You don't have to make believe. You don't have to make up some story. You don't have to attribute where you, as a living human creature, come from to some kind of fantasy that you concoct or someone else has concocted in the Urantia book, for instance, or in Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine. No. All you have to do is go out at the right time of the year and look at the sky. Many, many people around the world, even though they don't exactly know what they're seeing, recognize the form of the constellation of Orion, the Skywalker, as the Egyptians called him, or as they are thought to have named that constellation. Asar, I believe. My Egyptian is a little rusty these days. Skywalker. You see this mammoth figure walking across the sky with a characteristic belt, and there, hanging down on the right side of the figure, on its right side, you see this blotch. That's the Orion Nebula. That's where you come from. Everything is material. I know there are some of you by now, or I suspect, I won't say I know, that's a bit arrogant. I suspect there are some of you by now who get a bit of a thrill every time I say that. Everything is material. The human genome is a material plasm consisting of a nucleic acid substrate, which is a fluidic medium distributed across the stars of the trapezium in the Orion Nebula. And that is such. That is a fact. It is an inarguable fact. It is not make-believe. It is not an hypothesis. So how wonderful it is that if you want to see the origin of your own material being, you can go out in the sky and look at it, and do look at it. Do contemplate that beautiful vision on some occasion, on every occasion when you have the opportunity. You'll see what it does to you to look in that direction and know what you are seeing. Now, proceeding with the written text, following my comment on the Orion Nebula with these illustrations, I introduce the acronym T-A-D, tad. And I propose to use this word to replace the word people. For some time now, I've been, I won't say uncomfortable, but I don't really enjoy the word people. It always makes me think of People magazine, and I see myself standing in the supermarket checkout line with a can of tuna and a quart of milk, looking at the latest issue of People magazine. People, the peeps. I really don't like this word. When you talk about the dignity and worth of the human person, to me the word people does not convey that. So I came up with this abbreviation, TAD, which stands for Tertiary Anthropine Derivative, which is pretty fancy, you gotta admit. I mean, it's a fine day of the week when you can invent something like that. As a matter of fact, it's quite precise Gnostic language. Tertiary Anthropine derivative. So Anthropine refers, of course, to the Anthropos, the Anthropine species. Are you materially, right now, as an individual specimen, as a human animal, a single human animal, standing on 2 feet, with 2 arms and a head, like all the other human animals, unless they're born in a mutilated condition, are you the embodiment of the Anthropine genome that is suspended materially in the Orion Nebula? Well, yes and no. You are a derivative of it, but you are not a pure embodiment of it. Think of raw milk. Suppose that you never knew that raw milk existed and that it came from cows. Suppose you only knew that milk was a beverage you buy in the supermarket. There are people, by the way, who are in this condition, I can assure you. So there's milk that you buy in the supermarket. So you come home with a carton of milk, and let's say you decided to try something new and you saw, chocolate milk. So you come home with a carton of chocolate milk, you open it, you pour it out a glass, and you drink it. And what are you tasting? You're tasting pasteurized milk, probably milk that has been subjected to UHT, ultra-high temperature for preservation, and it has chocolate added to it. So that milk is a derivative of raw milk. But you might not even know that raw milk exists. You have never encountered raw milk. Likewise, you have never encountered a direct, explicit incarnation of the Anthropine genome. You yourself are not that. You are a derivative. You are a racial derivative. You're a TAD, a tertiary Anthropine derivative. Why tertiary? Well, I explain in the text that the first condition of the Anthropos is its condition within the pleromic core. The fallen goddess scenario, sacred narrative, says that the human genome was designed. Let me get out of the passive voice. It says that 2 aeons, Sophia and Thelete, designed and calibrated the human genome in the galactic core. So the first time that the human genome was actually formed, it existed in the galactic core. Yes, there is nucleic acid in the galactic core. It's not exactly the same as nucleic acid appears outside the core, but it is the same substance. Okay? So that's the first degree of the genome, nucleic acid in the core. The second degree of the Anthropine genome is the nucleic acid outside the core. The great film in the form of dew on a spider's web of nucleic acid deposited in M42. That's the second degree, or the second derivative condition. Then, how does it happen that that genome in the Orion Nebula comes to propagate itself in planetary systems? Well, the propagules of the genome, which are like freeze-dried granules of coffee, if you will, granules of freeze-dried coffee, these propagules, they turn into propagules once they are drawn out of the nebula on fine filaments of plasmic electrical currents. And these filaments of plasmic electrical currents run through the entire region of the galactic arms. And the propagules of the Anthropos carried on these filaments eventually, sooner or later, by chance, find an hospitable planetary environment, because there are many, many planets in the galactic limbs. I'm talking about just our galaxy alone, the Orion galaxy as it's called. And so they drop into the atmosphere as flakes or grains, and they become fertilized by the conditions of the atmosphere, and this is how human beings emerge in the environment of a planetary laboratory. And that is the third condition, tertiary. So, let me be the one to break the news to you. You're a tad. I'm a tad. Everybody's a tad. People are tads. And I'm going to practice calling people tads and using that word instead of people, saying, well, some tad's this and some tad's that, and that tad's sitting over there in the corner sucking on a beer. It might have occurred to you that this particular term, this particular way of speaking of people, carries the allusion to tadpoles. And isn't it true that the male sperm that fertilize the woman and produce or reproduce the human species by what is called meiosis look exactly like tadpoles? So every one of you tads, including myself, is here because a spermatic tadpole managed to burrow its way into one of the ova, one of the eggs, that was sliding down the channel of the fallopian tubes of a woman. And that's just the plain facts of the case. Now you'll note in the text that I make a point, which I've already made before. I'm going to continue to emphasize. Bear with me if I get repetitive. Some things bear repeating. You are a derivative of the human species, appearing in a racial strain. No one embodies or can embody the genomic root identity itself. Do you see that? That is a material fact. No one can embody the genomic root identity. You can only embody a derivative, a racial strain of that identity. Everything is material, and what is true for the material is true for everything else as well. What is true for the material is true for the ethical, the ideological, and the psychological. if it is true for the material that no human being born of a woman, due to the unity of sperm and ovum, can embody the genomic root identity, if that is materially true, biologically true, then it is also true that there can be no truthful image of the Anthropos as a genomic identity. Nevertheless, you have lived all your life with that image, haven't you? There is an image unique in the world, an image of a man, a male member of the human species, who is said to embody the genomic root identity. And that image of Jesus, or of Jesus/Christ, the human divine hybrid, is a hateful deceit. It's not just a deceit, it's not just a lie, it's a hateful deceit that has been planted in the mind of the human races by a race that sets itself apart and hates them all. As I've said before, and I can only try to say it again as cogently and eloquently as possible, as I've said before, in the form of a question. If you receive the image of your own humanity from a group that places itself outside humanity and hates you, what could possibly go wrong? What could possibly arise that would harm you and defeat you in your humanity if you derive your image of humanity in that way, from that source? And I want you to be absolutely sure of one thing. If you do not take away anything else from this talk, you, every single one of you, and I'm speaking to you now, each to each, individually, you need to realize that your image of humanity, your sense of humanity, and your ability to perceive humanity when you look at other people and when you look into yourself has been given to you. It is not your own product. It is not the product of your own heart or your own sensibility or the powers of your own imagination. But, hold on. There is a way of perceiving humanity materially that can be all that. There is a way of perceiving and sensing humanity in yourself and others that can be your own product. But you can only achieve that on the other side of the Great Dissent. This challenge requires that you overthrow and reject entirely the view of humanity that has been given to you. You must recognize who gave it to you. The source of it is no mystery. The source of it is not something to speculate about. Everybody knows who gave to the human races their universalist sense of humanity. Everybody knows that. And that is what you must reject. The sense and image of humanity coming from that source. The Great Dissent has, you might say, a negative and a positive aspect. It has a rejecting or defiant aspect. It is an act of defiance, but it also has an affirmative aspect. First, in the Great Dissent, you defy and deny and reject the sense and image of humanity that has been given to you. And then, in the affirmative aspect of this event, of this great, great undertaking, you find the sense and image of humanity that comes as your own product. It's yours because you make it yourself, because you fabricate it out of the very material of your own soul and psyche, out of your intellect and imagination. It is your own creation. It is your own project and not something that you received from an alien source. So, if you're with me so far, and this is a steep haul. I think you can see that by now. If you're with me so far, we'll just go into the home stretch. I'll skim quickly over the remainder of the text. You'll note there that I bring up the issue of eugenics. I discuss the term salutary respect, which occurs in this remarkable citation from a book by the historian Arnold Toynbee and Daisaku Ikeda, who apparently was a Japanese intellectual. Remarkable citation. And in that passage that comes under the subheading of what human dignity, I point out that both Christianity and communism are firmly based on this concept of universal humanity, which has been given to you. I know of no other citation in all of my work, all of my studies and research, that is as clear as the one I present here. What Toynbee and his collaborator say is so important. Communism is an outcome of Christianity. Of course it is. And communism is an outcome of Talmudic Judaism. Of course it is. And the concept of the proletariat, the internationale, that's a cliche, that's a meme from communism. What is the internationale? Well, it's the group of the mass of people who can be all lumped together no matter what country, what origin, what race they come from, what culture they were brought up in. They can all be massed together as an international or corporate body. And they are the oppressed. And communism claims to fight for the liberation of the oppressed and to bring justice to the oppressed. And that whole ideology and agenda crumbles before your eyes when the prop of universality is removed. This concept, it's not only a concept, but it's a sense and it's an iconic image all in one. That complex of universality props up communism. And it comes from Christianity. It comes out of the Judeo-Christian belief system and the Abrahamic religions. How does Islam factor into this equation? Well, I'll just give you a wild guess. Since Islam means submission, then everyone who submits and becomes a Muslim belongs to the same faceless corporate mass of humanity. So when one Muslim looks at another through the eyes of a Muslim, a follower of Islam, that Muslim sees a reflection of his or her own humanity in the face of the other Muslim. Can you see that? But what they see is an illusion and a lie. It's as if there is some real entity or agency, as if there is some true and genuine presence existing in that faceless recognition. The recognition of 1.6 billion faceless zombies for one another. That's the universality of Islam. It's the same scam. It's the same lie. It's the same hateful deceit. The Abrahamic religions all have the same root, and that is the archaic deceit of the Tzaddikim. Coming around to the conclusion of the text, there are just two more points I would like to highlight. First one, I might give you in the form of a recitation. It's only one short sentence, and you can certainly memorize it. If I may be so bold to say so, it could be one of the more important things you ever learn in your entire life. And it goes like this. The Anthropos is purely imaginal, extra-biological. Races are existential, biologically real. Two sentences, actually. Can you handle two sentences? Now you may have a question about my use of the term extra-biological or exobiological. There is actually a word, exobiology. It refers, I believe, to the existence of biological creatures and entities outside the atmosphere of the earth. Exobiology. Is the Anthropos exobiological? Absolutely. Purely on material terms. It is a plasm. It is a gently throbbing, well, gently on the scale of millions of light years, a gently throbbing membrane of a biological plasm deposited extraterrestrially, so it is exobiological, but it's still biological, it's still material. The Anthropos is purely imaginal, exobiological, but races are existential, biologically real. There, I made it into one sentence for you. Is that easier? I want to make it easy, believe me, I do. And I've got to warn you, that's what's coming in the continuity of this talk. What's coming in the completion of this topic is a game changer like nothing you've ever seen before. It's brewing. It's brewing like a storm. It's getting strong. And when it breaks like a thunderhead, I'll be there to tell you what's happening and to read the weather. I'm not just going to read this for the staff. I'm going to read this for everyone who comes into PT. Why do you come into PT? Why are you interested? Why are you here? Why did you sign up for Namath to be a guest and a member? You want to know who you really are. You want to know what you're really looking at when you walk down the street and you look at other human beings streaming towards you on the sidewalk? Do you want to know what you're really looking at? Do you want to know what to look at? What to look at. That's an instruction. You've never been told what to look at when you cast your eyes and cast your gaze over your fellow human beings. All those other tads, right? All those tads out there on the street. The reality of it is, you have been told what to see in humanity, but you have not been taught how to see humanity. So who's going to teach you how to see humanity? Well, that's an assignment that's bound to be rather unique, obviously. And so it goes to a unique entity, but actually it goes to a unique process. So the Maitreya can teach you how to see humanity, how to perceive it, and how to perceive the racial strains of humanity, and to know the distinction. But the Maitreya only does that by engaging you in a process of which you are also the source. You cannot undertake the process without becoming yourself a source for the process. This is how deep it runs, as the discourse now takes us in the direction of this great question, of this great challenge, the Great Dissent. So finally, I close on a text with an image, probably one of the top 5 religious images in the world, which is the sculpture known as the Pietà of Michelangelo. So there you have Mary, the Virgin Mary, the mother of the human-divine hybrid, who is said to embody the perfection and essence of humanity in a way that no other human being can. And there he is, limp and dead, a corpse in the laps of his mother. And you are supposed to celebrate this image, not only as the picture or icon of your own humanity, but as that which gives you the sense of that humanity. Do you have a sense of your humanity when you look at this limp, dead corpse, a victim of torture? Is that where you get your sense of humanity? From a tortured corpse? Well, many people do. And that is a fucking inarguable fact, isn't it? Just savor it for a moment. This is how far it's gone. This is how bad it's gone and how rotten it's gone. And people like Nancy Pelosi, and there are millions and millions of them, are operating in righteousness out of a sense of humanity that has gone totally rotten. As rotten as any fruit or any piece of meat that ever came under your nose. Welcome to Kali Yuga. It's a time of the most extreme decadence and degradation of humanity, but also the moment of spectacular and unparalleled realizations, which are sudden realizations, sudden and immediate realizations.
The Fall of the Wisdom Goddess by John Lamb-Lash. Here in a 9-part synopsis is one version of the sacred myth of Sophia, the fallen goddess of the pagan mysteries. The fallen goddess scenario is not the invention of this author, John Lash. It is his reconstruction of a mythic narrative developed by ancient seers who applied it as a vision story for guiding humanity to evolve interactively with the living planet Gaia. The author John Lash considered this complex narrative to be the singular and paramount explanation of cosmic purpose, produced by human imagination, truly a myth to guide the species. My recovery and reconstruction of the fallen goddess scenario is the only full and coherent version of the Sophianic vision story of the mysteries to be presented by any scholar, yet it is still not complete. 3 key elements of the myth are missing: the creation of the moon, the separation of the sexes of Anthropos, human genome, and the arrival of the hunters from Orion, the first men to inhabit the earth, which was at that time exclusively populated by women. In its received form, the Sophianic vision story falls into the genre of astral theogony, an account of celestial events, including the intentions, feelings, and actions of cosmic forces, conceived as gods and goddesses. The following version demonstrates one possible way to render the myth, namely by placing it in an astronomical framework, thus perhaps making it more accessible to the modern mindset. This is not the only way to tell the myth, but after long consideration I'm convinced it may be the optimal way to introduce the Sophianic vision of the mysteries to the 21st century. This sacred narrative is the sole planetary myth in the world that describes the origin of the solar system, the Earth, and the human species, and situates all this in a galactic perspective. Be it understood that the myth need not be fantasy or falsity, but a veracious way of describing events of cosmic scope, including the galaxy where the Earth is located. Sophia is the astrotheological term for a power surge from the galactic core that impacted the rotating arms. The fall of the goddess is an eruption from that core. This is an animistic myth, attributing the equivalent of emotion, ideation, and intention to the cosmic energies of the galaxy, imaginatively realized as gods and goddesses. I addressed the predictable objections to cosmic animism in a related essay. Not in His Image contains both a short synopsis and, in another rendering, a full expansion of the 9 episodes. The Gaia mythos is an attempt to render the narrative in a mythopoetic form as a prose poem, but incomplete with 11 episodes of 16 online. The Sophia myth in astronomical idiom. 1. In the galactic core. At a certain moment in eternal becoming, a singularity arises in the core of one galaxy among countless galaxies in the universe. This singularity is a spontaneous rush of new potential, totally unconditioned and undefined. It emerges from that one universal source, which is the eternal dwell point of every galaxy, but in each galaxy standing unique so that originality can manifest through the universe. In each galaxy, the originator is the all-pervading presence, greater than any god, any single divine entity. It stands beyond time and space and matter, yet it comes to expression time and time again through the pleroma, the central vortex of a particular galaxy. Within the pleroma dwell the aggregate of cosmic gods, energy waves of the galactic dimension. They circulate around the core, massive currents of living luminosity, thriving with sound, odor, even taste. Their form is a serpentine, torrential streaming, their substance a nougat-like mass of self-generating luminosity. These pleromic currents receive the singularity of pure potential from the originator and spin it into expression. They convert the formless seed of originality into a standing wave design that can eventually appear in space, time and matter beyond the galactic core. The originator imposes nothing on these cosmic designing powers, the generators, or aeons. The singularity it releases to them is an undefined potential for novelty, without signature, non-encoded. It has no pre-designed structure. It is pure, unconditioned possibility. The singularity is like a vast but infinitely soft tremor that erupts from the galactic core and spreads through the coral waves of the pleroma, the aggregate of aeonic torrents. In every case when a singularity emerges in the galactic core, it comes to be designed differently by the aeons of each galaxy, who are infinitely creative, innovative and playful. Once designed, the singularity can be projected from the core into the outlying region of the limbs, the spiral arms circulating around the core. This region is the realm of infinite potential, the kenoma, contrasted to the infinite potential of the pleroma, matrix of the generators. The spiral arms are regions of constant activity. Like a mill wheel, they grind out stars, planets, comets and asteroids from the grist remaining of previous galaxies. The dema, the dense elementary matter a race of the spiral arms are chaotic and inorganic, consisting of atomic matter and even finer substances, mere quantum foam. Yet the Dima has self-organizing powers of a sort, so that it can form and reform itself plastically into the scaffolding and groundwork of many world systems. The endless reworking of matter in the spiral arms is subject to the mill-like mechanism of involution, including mass-bound attraction-repulsion and differential rotation, forces that are entirely absent in the galactic core. Two, a singularity encoded. The nougat-like mass of the galactic core pulses with the dance of alternating currents, gendered energies. The male currents stream through the pleromic mass with an anchoring action, like filaments extruding from a sieve. The female currents stream with an expulsive power that hollows out the way before them. Anchoring and decoring are the constant gender expressions of the generators. In one particular galaxy, a singularity from the originator is received by two aeons with the equivalent of gender, female and male. The aeon Sophia and her counterpart, the aeon Thelete. This name means the intended or free will. In a tandem activity, these two balance the singularity between them and dance it into a particular design. Each generator is an energetic wave with inherent properties and characteristics. As a current moving along optical fibers can carry signals, so do these waveforms carry vast arrays of configurated impulses. The receiving aeons impart to the singularity a select combination of their attributes, making a unique design, never before manifested. By their combined activity, they imbue the singularity with a set of inherent properties derived from their own impulses. They encode its pure potential with definite properties that can unfold in a distinctive way when provided with the world system as a setting for those properties. In this instance, Sophia and Thelete design a life form, the template of a species, the Anthropos. The specific configuration of the Anthropos is an expression of the creative vision of the cosmic dyad, the pair of generators. The human genome originates in a dance of cosmic energies in the galactic core. Three, projecting the Anthropos. With creative dance of Sophia and Thelete completed, the singularity is configured and ready to be released. In a collective act of emanation, all the aeons circulating the galactic core merge their currents to form a lattice, like a holographic plate. Using the lattice as a lens, the pleromic aeons in their entirety project the Anthropos into the outer realm beyond the bounding membrane of the galactic nucleus. Out there is the Kenoma, the zone of dark elementary matter arrays, Dima, swirling in the immense carousel of the spiral arms. The encoded singularity will be seated in the Dima, where new worlds are constantly arising, so that the Anthropos can have a habitat, a world of its own, in which to unfold its singular potential. Many strains of humanity can emerge from the template so projected, and there are many world systems rising and dissolving in the galactic limbs, providing ample opportunity for these strains to take root and develop. Imagine a hollow stalk of light in the form of an immense opalescent shaft with a genomic design within it. The genomic template of humanity is a stereomorphic projection into the outer regions of the galaxy, remaining within the boundary of the galactic core. The aeons inject the pre-designed genome into the outer realms of the galaxy, as if through a glass tube or pipette. Acting in unison, the generators implant the potential novelty of the human species in the carousel arms, like a fertilized ovum implanted in the wall of the uterus. For the aeons, this projection of the anthropic template, designed by Sophia and Thelete, is the first moment of a divine experiment. From the galactic center, they will observe how the human strain propagates and unfolds its novel potential in many worlds. Their acts of projection may be compared to dreaming, rather than to biological reproduction of offspring by two parents, or artificial creation, like a potter spinning a pot. It is a process of emanation, not creation. Humanity is not the progeny of divine beings, made in their image, but the expression of the divine imagination of the generators, who design and project cosmic singularities into free-form manifestation in a myriad worlds. The pleromic aeons project the Anthropos into the galactic limbs with a precise target intention of location. They embed the template for incubation in a molecular cloud or galactic nebula in the third spiral arm, counting outwards. The fertile moisture of the nebula is the ideal medium for nesting the new life complex. This done, the generators withdraw their projective action, pull back to observe in detachment what happens next. Energetically, the generators do not exceed the boundaries of the pleroma, the matrix of infinite potential. They remain within the boundary of the nucleus, yet they observe and sense what lies beyond it in the kenoma, the matrix of finite potential. The delight of the aeons is to behold the spontaneous arising and dissolving of myriad worlds, and to divine the adventures of the creatures that emerge in those worlds. To do this, they use a kind of cosmic empathy that does not require that they enter or intervene in the worlds they witness. Aeons are sentient, feeling intensively and responding to what they observe, yet remaining detached. The cosmic gods are impartial. They do not impose their intention for an outcome on any experiment unfolding in the galactic limbs. Above all, they do not enter directly into the experiments they have designed and set in motion by externalization in the spiral arms. Not usually, anyway. But at a certain moment, one generator in the aggregate of this particular galaxy responds more keenly than the others to the sight of the Anthropos template nesting in the molecular cloud of Orion. While the other Aeons hold back, the one called Sophia senses an unusual stirring of her currents. The cosmic equivalent of desire draws her right up to the boundary of the pleroma, where she lingers. The Aeon Sophia feels a profound, unsettling attraction to what she beholds. She is captured by total fascination for how the Anthropos will evolve and manifest its unique potential. Drawing her currents away from the general aggregation, Sophia muses about the world to come where the human singularity will emerge and thrive. She empathizes intensely with the human creature that will appear in the divine experiment now underway. As one of the Aeons who configured the genome, she takes an unusual interest in its future development, and she do that unilaterally, without consulting with her counterpart Thelete. This is unusual behavior for a generator, transgressing the norm. But it is within the freedom allowed by the originator that such developments can arise. The Aeon Sophia now formulates her own act of projective dreaming, centered on the glittering template suspended in the spiral arms. Independent of the other Aeons, this Toriantial waveform dreams on her own about what might happen to a strain of the Anthropos. In her freedom, Sophia is impetuous, daring. She goes much farther than Aeons usually do to anticipate how a certain experiment might play out. She idolizes the situation, picturing a three-body system, star, planet, moon, where a strain of the Anthropos would have optimal opportunity to discover and develop its encoded talents, even to achieve works of genius. Sophia is tremendously excited by these prospects of the divine experiment that has only now been seeded in the kenoma, the matrix of finite potential. Four. Cosmic Power Search. Totally enthralled in her solitary view, and ever more detached from the other generators in the pleroma, Sophia previsions a world yet to be, where humanity will emerge to live, learn, and love. The sight of the Anthropos nested in the nebular cloud engages her divine powers of dreaming in an unusual way, with exceptionally intense involvement. Rather than leave this cosmic novelty to mature and unfold on its own, according to the instructions encoded within it, the pleramic current, whose signature is wisdom, succumbs to a strange attraction. Sophia is deeply compelled to get involved in an experiment with the strain of the Anthropos. With exquisite slowness, Sophia's longing pulls her precariously close to the porous bounding membrane of the pleroma, the outer rim of the galactic core. Her desire follows the path taken by the Anthropos out into the Dima, the chaotic flux of elementary matter in the spiral arms. Compelled by the excitement of what might happen out there, this aeon is gradually pulled away from the core until the moment she plunges out and away. Like a slow-motion waterfall twisted into a torrential braid, the Aeon Sophia spirals downward toward the object of her own desire. The currents that compose her energetic form distend into a massive power spike, a tongue of pearl-white luminosity leaping from the pleroma, shooting light years into the exterior regions. The wisdom goddess falls out of the galactic center. The composite luminosity of an aeon, a pleramic god or goddess, may be called organic light, because it is organically responsive and capable of intention, like an animal. This divine luminosity has two specific but oddly contrasting properties. It is mass-free and infinite in density. Sophia's fall produces a plume of organic light, extending from the galactic core in the third limb of the carousel arms, where the Orion Nebula is located. There it reaches the place where the genomic template of the human species is nested, like a pattern of dew points on a spider's web.